The Vandenberg Air Force Base has earned a reputation as one of America's most active UFO hotspots, with documented encounters spanning from 1964 up until present day. And what's really interesting is that in last week's UFO hearing, Jeff Nuccetelli also brought up Vandenberg Air Force Base. So today we're examining why this California installation, which transformed from an Air Force base to a Space Force facility, continues to attract unexplained aerial phenomena, and what the military has on record when it comes to these UFO encounters. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Mysteries with a History. I'm Christina Gomez. I'm bringing my co-host, Jimmy Church of Fade of Black Radio. Jimmy, happy Thursday. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing? That's the question.
Always
I'm great. It's raining out here. We were just talking in the green room. We were in the green room. Yeah, that's where we hang out. Anyway, yeah, it's raining out here. I love it. I didn't get to ride today, but just hanging out. And Thursdays, just really quick. Thursdays for me are very busy, right? I do the news in the morning. I'm on with you in the afternoon, and then I have Fade to Black at night. And when it's raining outside, it's a great day to just get stuff done. You know what I mean? It's raining and you're just indoors and you hear and you've got all these shows to do. It's great. I just love Thursdays and the rain just makes it more special. So there you go. Now I'm just going to tell everybody, Christina, I'm going to throw you under the bus. I predicted something in Christina's future. I ripped open I put the envelope to my head, right? Read it, tore it open, and read its contents. You know what it said?
What did it say?
Christina's getting a motorcycle. I see it. The hair flowing, goggles. I see it. A leather World War I fighter helmet, with goggles. Yeah, and a scarf.
It's a vibe. I don't see why not.
Powering down the road. All right, so crazy week last week. And this hearing, kind of hard to judge because each one had its own elements. Even going back to the first one with the two military guys, I forget their names right now, who were totally, just misinformation agents. But that was an interesting hearing because of how they handled the questions. And so moving on from that, the rest of the hearings have all been pretty good and had their highlights. And of course, Grush and Graves and David Fravor, just really good stuff. But last week, and what stood out for me, I want your comments on this before we move on. Taking George Knapp out of the mix, and he did great, but taking him out of the mix, we had 4 members of the military, and one of them, Wiggins, is currently enlisted in the military. And I was speaking this week with a bunch of different people and researchers about it, and they were getting my comments, and I was getting theirs. Wiggins, he had to go back to work, Christina.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You got to go back to work. You've got to be around everybody after that, raising your right hand and sitting in front of a congressional committee on a subject like this while you are still an active member of the Navy. Pretty intense, which for me and with everybody there, I thought that all of the testimony was very compelling. And it was very strong and very straightforward, including Wiggins. Today, we're going to talk about Nuccetelli. But Wiggins was didn't you think he was just matter of fact? Right? Just straight into the microphone and let it. How did that affect you? What did you make of, an active member like that, just speaking so directly on this subject?
Well, for starters, he did sound very nervous compared to Nuccetelli, who just really controlled the mic. I think one of the best on the panel, of course, next to George Knapp, because he's a journalist. But if we're looking at Wiggins just for a moment, he was very matter of fact, but he was nervous. You can tell he's not really used to the spotlight. And him being an active duty member in the Navy is very shocking that he even got permission from his higher ups to be a part of the panel to speak under oath about his UFO sighting on the USS Jackson, which was really remarkable. Some are a bit skeptical on that, and I completely understand. But it's the first time that an active member has ever come forward and spoken about their UFO sighting under oath. So that was an absolute shocker and definitely one of the highlights, I think, for many when it came to the UFO hearing.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, it had to be with everybody there too as well, but except for Knapp, he's a journalist and he can speak freely. But Wiggins, at first, once got started and he started to let it out, he got his feet underneath him. But I can only imagine the night before thinking about this, right? And any repercussions and getting up in the morning. You probably don't sleep or sleep much. I'm being very serious. And then going in with that kind of environment around you. But once he got his feet underneath him, I thought that Wiggins was pretty solid. For him to say those things, again, active service member, to go, man, I saw it with my own eyes, right? There were 4. And then we all saw it. Then we saw it on the radar. We saw it. And one of the things, and we'll move on momentarily. One of the questions was, so were people on the ship talking about it? He said, no, but in the sensor room, where we were all gathered, yes, we were all talking about it. And which opens the door, doesn't it, for other whistleblowers and other people to come forward that were with him. And certainly with the stuff that we're going to cover today, is it Nuccetelli? Nuccetelli? What isn't that a spread?
That's Nutella.
He's not related. Okay, that's Nutella. Okay, so is it
Nuccetelli? But something worth mentioning is that he created a podcast, and I believe it was yesterday. He had stated what it was like behind the scenes being a whistleblower. And just to add to your point, referring to Wiggins and trying not being able to sleep the day before the hearing, Nuccetelli had mentioned that he was with the other whistleblowers for 2 days straight, doing everything together, talking it all up about their encounters and their personal life. And he also mentioned that if he didn't know the people next to him on the panel during the hearing, it would have been a completely different situation, a very completely different hearing altogether if they didn't know each other, respected each other, and had each other's backs, it seems like. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that they had to really spend 2 entire days talking it up in order to, I think, create a very flowing hearing that we got.
Yeah, to support each other,
right,
support
exactly.
each other. Like I said, it's got to be a nerve-wracking night. I know what it's like the night before. I've got a conference or I've got to go film a movie, or even the moments before Fade to Black or this show. There's a little bit of nervousness, anxiety, or whatever it may be. But I'm heading out the next day, getting on a plane and going to film. I'm thinking about things, things are going through, and it's got to be times 10 with something like that. I can't imagine going in front of Congress talking about this stuff, and then knowing you're going to have to deal with what comes later as well. George Knapp, he does this, for breakfast. This is what he does. Not that big of a deal, but for the others, yeah. Now, back to Nuccetelli.
You got it.
Is it Noose?
Nuccetelli.
Nuccetelli.
Now I'm guessing it.
What I know, right? I listened, by the way, so closely in the hearing. there was like 4 different pronunciations with his name, and I was like,
Same with
well,
David Fravor in the last hearing. Everyone got his name wrong, and I was like, poor thing. He's
I
getting
know,
bullied.
Well, Jeffrey, let's call him Jeffrey. He's Air Force Police, Air Force Security on base at Vandenberg. And for transparency, I have been to Vandenberg. I have been all over the base. I was there to watch a SpaceX launch by invitation of the base commander. It was really cool, but I got to see the size of the base. The base is ginormous, heavy security everywhere you go. All of the 3-letter agencies, all of them, have offices there. There's lots of radar and sensor and things that are used for security. Plus, it's on the Pacific coast. So when you see the size of the base and you're driving through and you're driving past, an NRO office, for example, you're driving past that, and then you see the rockets and the display that they have from the past, and it's all over the base, and it's huge. That is something that needs to be absolutely on lockdown and secure. So for this testimony to come up from him that Graves talked about when he was giving his testimony, he talked about what Nuccetelli had referred to him. There's documentation on this case and everything else, but he is a security officer from the Air Force. And the testimony, which I think is very, very important, he says he's got official documentation of the incident, number one. And number two, that the witnesses, the Boeing contractors, and the security people at Space Force Base Vandenberg, back then it was Vandenberg Air Force Base, we're all talking about this. They know what they saw. And what I am referring to is the Vandenberg Red Square. Absolutely amazing. What was the Red Square?
So this one, but before we touch on that, the Air Force Base switched over to the space facility back in 2021, back in May. And what Nuccetelli saw, it's really interesting, and I'll make this quick, is that Ryan Graves actually mentioned it during the last UFO hearing, but he didn't disclose who the witness was.
That's right.
We didn't find out until much later that Ryan Graves was referring to Nuccetelli. And since then, he had done an interview with Ryan Graves on his show. He did a few others, but no one really knew about him. I really felt like Nuccetelli kind of fell through the cracks in the last year. And for many, people saw him for the very first time during this latest, the one in early September UFO hearing. People were like, who is this guy? Well, he did a few. He's told the story before. He gave the information to Greer, to Ryan Graves, and even to Arrow, which he had mentioned publicly that Arrow brushed him to the side like he had nothing to offer them. But Ryan Graves mentioned it in the last hearing, and Nuccetelli had mentioned in an interview, he's like, I can't believe I was mentioned, even though my name wasn't stated. That was my encounter, what happened at Vandenberg. And so to get into that, the first encounter that took place was October 14th, 2003. And for about 45 seconds, this object remains motionless over the Air Force Base, because then it was the Air Force Base. And then what happened next would remain classified in official Air Force security logs for about 2 decades until it came out in 2023 because of Ryan Graves. And so he was stationed, as Jimmy had mentioned, he was a police officer. He was guarding the area because some really big missile and rocket tests were going to be taking place during that time frame. And so when he arrived to his evening shift, there was something clearly wrong. A crowd had gathered outside the squadron building, and everyone was kind of talking at once. The morning shift had experienced what they called a real-world UFO event. But in this case, for him, it wasn't just one person seeing this. It was an official military incident with documentation here. And he has preserved the actual Air Force Form 43 security entry dating back to October 14th, 2003, officially titled the Patrol Response on an Unidentified Flying Object. And here's what it states. It says, Technical Sergeant X, because we don't have his name, notified the Security Forces Command Center he received a call telling him there was a red square object hovering in the air above FL 21. And the Launch Facility 21 is one of Vandenberg's missile defense sites. And then it continues. Master Sergeant X and Technical Sergeant X were dispatched and responded upon arriving on scene, and there was no evidence of any hovering objects in the vicinity. But this is kind of where it gets a little different from your typical UFO reports, because the Boeing contractors who witnessed this, well, obviously they're not random observers. They're Boeing contractors, and they were working on the National Missile Defense Project, which is a critical national security initiative designed to intercept incoming ballistic missiles. And the witness statement from the technical sergeant who took the initial calls reads, according to the report, I asked how big it was, and he replied it was huge. I asked if it's bigger than 20 feet, and he replied yes. He indicated it was a large square shape and red in color, and also indicated that it was not making any noise, just floating in the air. So at this point, they're following standard protocol. Their weather control was contacted. There were no balloons in the area. Radar control was contacted. There were no aircraft signatures. The tower reported nothing either. So this was labeled as something unexplained. There was no misidentification of anything mundane. And this also took place in 2003, a time where the stigma was very high. People just didn't want to talk about their UFO encounter. So this report was very quickly buried. But he had experienced other things while he was working there at Vandenberg as well. But that one is one of the sightings that definitely stands out the most.
Yeah, it's again worth repeating that I have been to Vandenberg. I've been not all over the entire base, but a big chunk of it. Security there is paramount. This is a gnarly, highly secure, top secret base. You see it everywhere you go. You are on lockdown when you are there. It's very important. And security personnel and everything else, it's everywhere that you look. Now, this happened, by the way, Christina, this was at 8:45 a.m. when those Boeing contractors had gathered. They were there to work for the day. They've got security people around them too as well. And that's when they all observed that massive football field sized red square object floating silently off the coast. And by the way, Vandenberg, when you're there, it abuts all the way up on the Pacific Ocean. So you have a huge miles and miles and miles and miles of Air Force Base beach. Okay. All right. So when I observed SpaceX and all of these launch facilities that are there on the mountainsides, and including the missile stuff that you're talking about there, the defense system, is all right there on the coast. So when I observed SpaceX, the launch towers were right there on the beach, up the hill, on the side of the hill, but that's where we observed everything, was from the beach. And that's where these security people were. And the object, football field size red square, was out over the ocean near these defense missile installations. Now, here's the thing. All right. After hovering for about 45 seconds, it shot away and over the mountains, which is behind you if you're facing the ocean. If it was something like a square balloon, okay, all right, I'm just saying, right? If it was something, it wouldn't just dart away, and it would be identified as something other than something crazy, in this case, a UFO or a UAP. But here's the crazy part. this was followed by a second sighting hours later. All right. So it wasn't just the first sighting. There were two on that day. Now, he was a former security law enforcement officer. And because of his position, what is he doing? He's on the radio.
That's right.
He's talking to the other security people on the beach. They're all on the base. They're all seeing this. And he said that not only does he have official documentation from that day, and he has provided his account to Arrow, he said that the radio traffic during the initial incident, okay, with the Boeing contractors revealed total chaos and panic among the security people and the Boeing observers. Critical part of this testimony, Christina.
And they were panicking not because they were scared of the UFO sighting per se, but because it was hovering over a very secretive military installation, secretive in the case of what they were doing during that time frame, and because it's something that they couldn't control, hence the panic. So the radio transmission quickly escalated from routine observation to absolute panic. And it stated here, this object is now moving very radically, and it appears to be getting closer and larger, according to the report that was collected by Nuccetelli. And then it states, this thing is coming right towards us now. It's coming right at us, and now it's right here. So when he arrived at the scene after hearing all this panic through the radio transmission, he found 6 shaken security personnel, and they described a massive square-shaped object that had approached rapidly, turned off its lights, and hovered silently near their entry control point for approximately 45 seconds to a minute. And this wasn't the same red square from the morning that same day. This object was a little bit darker, and it was visible only as a massive shadow blocking out the stars, but equally enormous and equally silent. Sounds a little bit like the Phoenix Lights encounter. And when people saw that back in Phoenix, they stated that it was like this huge craft that was just blocking the stars. And while these were two separate incidents, there were multiple witnesses, and they happened on the same day at just hours apart. Wouldn't it have been so awesome to be like at work that day and you happen to have a 12-hour shift or something? You're like, oh man, I really don't want to work today. And then bam, you get 2 UFO sightings.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the Space Force security people that I was with that day, I just got to say this directly. They were geared up. Very serious. When I say geared up, I mean, right, just everything on them. And were very, very, very professional. One of the comments that I got from them was this. I said, wow, launch today. And they go, man, we don't announce everything, but something is launched from here every day. And it never gets old. It's totally cool to watch. So they are accustomed to rocket launches and security and everything else. And then to turn around and have them so rattled, right, with this football field size red square object. They're used to watching rocket launches going into the heavens every day, Christina, doing their security, protecting the country and protecting this base. And, nothing can phase them. They are accustomed to this. And then to turn around and have these 2 sightings happen in the same day with multiple witnesses, they were completely rattled. They were taken out of their comfort zone. And I just can't imagine how this processed with them. The other sighting that was also described as a silent triangular craft. Now you bring up Phoenix Lights. They describe that craft too as larger than a football field that hovered over an entry control point, and that also sped off back towards the mountains. Also, so Vandenberg on the Pacific Ocean, So that's the flat side with the beach, and then it sticks out like that. But the back side of Vandenberg, okay, heading east, that's all mountains. So to access Vandenberg, when you come off of the main freeway, you're driving through the mountains, Christina, for probably 45 minutes to an hour before you get to the main gates at Vandenberg. It's a very, very remote, hilly, mountainous area of central California.
It's overall just one of those very notorious Air Force bases, now space facilities, that people really need to keep an eye on. And before we continue, if anyone's seeing a button on their device that says hype, hit it and let me know in the comments, as it is a new YouTube feature being rolled out to help shows with the algorithm. And so if you see it, just click that and then let me know in the comments. Also hit that like button right down below as well. But if we
Did you
look at,
say, wait, hype?
yeah,
Hype?
hype. It's new. Just came out
Really?
from YouTube. Yeah. So you have the
See,
like button, then you have the
you're
hype button, but not everyone has the feature for the hype button.
oh, that's because not everybody is Christina Gomez. And yeah, I get that. I get that. I will ask everybody in the chat room tonight on the show if I've got a hype button. You have to turn it on.
No, it should be automatic. But
Okay.
it says, looking it up, it says swipe left on the comments preview carousel until the option to hype the video surfaces, or tap and the carousel will change to show the option to hype.
Okay,
So
everybody, you got that? Hype away. Hype this show up. Another thing with Nuccetelli was that in Japan in 1994, he saw another glowing orb in Japan that landed on the runway, on the flight line. And then fast forward to 2004, he saw nearly the exact same thing happen, this time at Vandenberg. He said it involved a light that landed on the flight line and then flew away. Now, is this Nuccetelli? Is this Vandenberg? Or is this happening all over the place?
Probably all over the place. There is a very strange connection between UFOs and military installations, specifically those with nuclear weapons. So the question would be, did or does Vandenberg base hold any nuclear weapons that you are aware of, Jimmy?
Yeah, that's what do we do with this? Well, ultimately, I think that's the question. The testimony is compelling. We have multiple witnesses. We have documentation. All of this is in play. All right. But what do we do with it? What does Congress do with this? This is Air Force. This is Space Force, which has notoriously been very, very quiet on these issues, and they don't want to give it up. The Navy seems to be more open about this and are okay. Like Wiggins, active member of the Navy, he is testifying as an active service member. I don't think we would ever see that from the Air Force. So what do we do with this? How do we move forward? How do we have Congress continue to apply pressure to the Air Force? What do we do with this information?
Well, what we know so far that was released by Ask a Poll, he interviewed Eric Burleson just yesterday, or at least it came out yesterday, that Burleson and the new task force is putting pressure on two agencies and two contracting companies to release UFO information. Otherwise, they will be subpoenaed. So it seems like that's kind of the way that Congress is moving forward, in particular to receive certain UFO information. However, it was also mentioned by Burleson that a lot of that request was stripped away, what Grush had personally written to get information from these two agencies and contractors, which we can probably guess who these entities are, but no names were given. And the excuse was, well, write this first request, make it super simple, let them agree, and then push them with the harder stuff. But it seems that Burleson was really distraught knowing that a lot of that request was peeled away. I want this and this and this, to, hey, can you just give me this one thing? And it'd be nice to see that actual report if we're able to FOIA it. Greenwald, I'm looking at you. Hopefully you can do that. But it seems like that's kind of the way we're moving forward. Now, if we look at the Air Force, well, they created Project Blue Book. They were very heavily involved in that. And then they stepped away. No one has ever come forward from the Air Force ever since then. That's at least had like backing behind them.
And
The Navy, on the other hand, no, you're right.
Nobody pressured the Air Force, and they got really comfortable with controlling the narrative. And now in this picture here that you've got up, all right, that building that you see in the background with the tile roof, that is the security office, right? And then in front is the gate, which is right to the left of this sign. So I'm in the security office, right back there, getting my clearance and stuff, getting ready to go on the base. And they let me take my car on the base too, as well, which is a civilian on the base driving their own car. Never happens, but I did anyway. So I'm there with the head of security, and it's pretty daunting, Christina. And this is what happens. I said, so can I take pictures? And he looks at me. He's up at the stat. He's looking down at me, and he goes, of what? I go, I don't know. He goes, no, you can't take pictures. He said, if there's a sign that says you can take pictures, you can take pictures. I go, okay, are there signs on the base that tell me that? He goes, no. Right. I said, okay, what can I take pictures of? He goes, come here. And we walk outside of that office right there into the parking lot, and he points at this sign. He goes, you can take a picture of that. Just like, I was like, wow, this is what's happening. So yeah, it's a heavy, I keep stressing this, a very secure installation. And to have these incidents there, and the way to go and get, and I talked to so many Air Force people that were there, to get stationed at Vandenberg is cool. It's a beautiful base. It's southern, central California. It's on the Pacific Ocean. It's really big. The facilities for families and personnel to live, it is just like a postcard. It's absolutely beautiful. And so when you talk, it is a privilege to be there, and they take the seriousness of the job. It is right on front burner. I can't stress that enough. And to have these incidents happen, not only these, by the way, Christina, with the drone wave that we had over the last year, we had Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. We had Wright-Patterson Air Force Base here in the United States, and Vandenberg. Vandenberg was once again part of this drone UAP activity over the base. And some people were arrested, some weren't. Some things were identified, a lot were not. And you have to, again, ask yourself, is this ET? Is this something off planet that is observing very important installations for us, for not only the Air Force, but aerospace in general? Looking at what level are we in evolution? Is it that, or is it something simpler? Is it our adversaries that are able to get onto these bases and to do these things? I don't know what's going on, but the activity itself is real and has been documented.
And just to provide a little bit of context, because you bring up a valid point, the drone that the drone that was flown over Vandenberg Air Force Base, the FBI caught the person. Turns out to be he was Chinese. He was arrested, and I believe he was sent back over to China. But that was the only time they actually were able to catch someone that was flying a drone over a military installation during that time frame between November, December into January of this year. The other remaining cases and incidents that took place over New Jersey, for instance, there were no people caught. There were no drones captured that we know of publicly, except for that incident over Vandenberg Air Force Base. Jimmy, we just have a few minutes left. And I think, obviously, when we talk about Vandenberg, we need to cover the most famous case, the one from 1964. Tell us about that.
How
could we forget?
Man, that's what happens with we've got so much action, right? There's so much to talk about. There he is right there. All right. So his name was Jacobs, right? I'm going to go off memory.
Jacobs, here.
What's that?
There he is.
Yeah, Robert Jacobs. Okay. See, I've got some mind left.
You do.
So 1964, what was crazy about this case? Again, it's Vandenberg, launch facilities, launch towers. It's just like Cape Canaveral, but it's an Air Force base and it's on the coast. But so when you go, if you ever have a chance and you go along the coastline there, you can see on the side, and we also have this out at Edwards, we have Rocket Site Road out here, and on the side of the mountain, you see all the launch towers where missile launch and testing occurs. And so this was something that they do and still do out at Vandenberg. They were testing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, with dummy atomic warheads. Okay, so now they're testing, they're filming, they're watching, and during one test that was filmed by Robert Jacobs, he's right there. He says that a UFO approaches the ICBM and then fires a plasma type light beam weapon at the missile, and they filmed the entire thing. There are a few different versions of this out there on the internet. I'm not sure which ones are real, but the one that he speaks about specifically, he says that film is not out there. There is other film out. Yes, there is. But the one where he captured everything happening, no, they took that film and it's never been released.
Yeah, the fact that people have mentioned that it is out there is shocking. After hearing Robert Jacobs' testimony of the CIA or people in black suits, which you can just kind of guess, or the CIA, which he also alluded to, but he didn't even know. They stood behind him while he was talking to his superior about the incident. They collected the film and it was never seen again. Now, what we're seeing here is an artist rendition of what happened in 1964. But when we're looking at Robert Jacobs, and I was really, really surprised that his name was even brought up during the last hearing. Mm-hmm. George Knapp had mentioned that Robert Jacobs had spoken to Arrow, and Arrow dismissed him as well, and Robert Salas and Nuccetelli. There's this reoccurring theme that Arrow collects witnesses and then just doesn't care for them.
If it doesn't line up with weather balloons, they don't want to hear it. That's the narrative that they want. They just want all of this to be explained away. That's it. They don't want to hear anything else. But Jacobs, I remember, and then I want to say another great show, and thank you for having me on with you, Christina. It's always great. I remember seeing, probably in the 90s, the film. Why it has been scrubbed from media and social media, what I remember seeing and what's out there now are two different things. But I do remember seeing this glowing object come in from the upper left. Yeah, this flying saucer. Well, I don't know where you got this. That's really funny. Anyway, it's a light that comes in from the upper left and then fires very briefly at the front of the missile, and it explodes and disintegrates. So what they didn't know, the ET, was that it was a dummy warhead. Maybe they thought it was real. I don't know. A dummy nuclear warhead. But yeah, once again, it's Vandenberg. It's Vandenberg. It's a beautiful base, by the way. I got to tell you, I remember, and then I'll say goodbye to everybody. I was there. We had a gathering of some Air Force people that were there, that were stationed on the base, and so I'm standing on the with, I don't know, there's probably 30 of us, and it's the family's quarters, and we're on the street, and I'm looking at the palm trees and the thing and the park across the street and how everything looked, and I was just overwhelmed by the central coast of California and its beauty. It's an unbelievably perfect base. And then you get outside of the family zone, you get away from that park, and you're driving past some of the most intense, secure facilities, clearly labeled. And yeah, it's pretty intense. It's pretty intense. The security people ended up taking me to shop. Yeah. So they take me to the PX, which, that's only Air Force personnel. That's it. But we go in and they talk to the staff there, and they said, let him get whatever he wants. So I went to the back. I went to where all the uniforms are. I tried to get a couple of patches. They wouldn't sell those to me. But I did get some T-shirts. I got a metal car emblem, a Space Force base emblem, which is on the back of my Jeep, and got a couple of Space Force hats. And they treated me really well, with respect, and they knew what I did. They did a complete background check on me, but they were okay with it, and never discussed UFOs, though. Never discussed UFOs. But the Space Force there at Vandenberg were very cool and treated me with respect. All right, even though that's crazy things go down there. So thank you so much, Christina. I'll see everybody tonight on Fade to Black. Is our once a month AMA AJA, where you get to hang out, we get to hang out, and you can ask me anything. So I'll see everybody tonight on Fade to Black. Christina, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button right down below and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to say thank you to everyone catching this live, for all of the super chats, super stickers, all of my amazing YouTube members, Patreon members, and moderators. You know I cannot do this show without you. And that is it for today. I will see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. PST for another UFO news update. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoyed today's show, hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit the notification bell, as I do daily UFO news and updates. Fresh UAP stories, government disclosures, and breaking developments land here every single day.